Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 667. I started off with d4 here. My opponent played d5. I went c4, and I go c6. So we have the Slav defense. I go knight f3, thereby avoiding the 1 hour gambit. He goes knight f6, the normal move. And I go e3. See, e3 is the second choice. The main move is knight c3, which is certainly playable, but leads to some complicated lines. So e3 is a little bit simpler. And then often this leads to the Moran variation, but my opponent chooses the Slav, the Schlechter Slav with g6. Let's see. The traditional Slav would continue with bishop to f5 or bishop to g4, getting that bishop outside the pawn chain and preparing to take on c4. Also, just e6 is good here, and that might lead to the Moran variation, which is interesting for black as well as white. Or a6. That's a particular kind of Slav too that I can't think of the name of it right now. Anyway, g6, the Schlechter Slav. I go knight c3. That's the main move. Goes bishop g7, and now I play a weird move, c5. So it's just not a normal move here. I was kind of tempted by it because I was thinking might help keep this bishop locked in. But, well, he can always break with e5 here. So I think c5 is just not a good idea in this position. I should keep these pawns flexible and just be prepared to take. Anyway, let's see. What's a normal move here? A normal move would be like bishop e2. And the line might continue, say castles, castles, and a6. And a4, kind of a funny move. I don't know if I would have thought of a4. Also, bishop to d2, developing the bishop, or b3, and that's playable. Anyway, c5 we're actually out of the opening book because in this particular position it's just not played. And from the engine evaluation, it seems like black is equalized here. So definitely a mistake. He castles. I go h3. I was thinking, well, we're keeping this bishop locked in behind the pawn chain. It hasn't got any great squares to go to. If it lands on f5 there, I can always harass it with knight to h4. So anyway, that was the idea there. He goes rook e8, and I go bishop e2, and now he goes knight to e4. So all this is okay, stays about even. I castle, he takes, I take, and then he plays e5. So e5 is a bit of a mistake on his part. The chess engine wants to play with knight d7 and pawn to b6 in some order, and just try and undermine the pawns that way. So that seems like a reasonable way to play. Actually, e5 gives me a lot of activity here. You just have to not be afraid of the shattered pawn structure. So this is correct to go ahead and take that. And then if he wants the disrupted pawn structure, well, he needs to take just to get his pawn back. And so we get this kind of position where I have the bishop pair. I have these doubled and isolated pawns, so it's worst pawn structure ever, but they can be liquidated. This c4 push is always available, and these open lines create opportunities for the bishops. So actually this is quite a good position for white, and so I judged this part correctly. Let's see, I went bishop to b2, he went rook back to e8, I went c4. That's what I mean about dissolving. And then d takes c4 leads to a losing position for black, actually. And the chess engine wants to play bishop e6 and just try and hold on things. Plus, developing another piece, black is really falling behind in development. But anyway, he played d takes c4. And then right here I made my second mistake, which is I allowed the queen trade. This position is much better for white when the queens are on, particularly. So allowing the queen trade still keeps an advantage to white, but it's a much stronger advantage if I avoid the queen trade. So just the move queen to c1, getting away from the trade. Also, keeping an eye on the c pawn so I can still round that up. I'm not giving up and winning that pawn back. And queen to c3 becomes an idea too. So queen to c1 has like 3 ideas in one. So queen to c3, obviously setting up this battery along the dark squared diagonal. And when the bishop comes to c4, there's also a battery, not a battery, but there's a pin along this diagonal, which makes it very difficult for black to defend. And black's pieces are still on the back rank. So after this move, queen c1, the chess engine says black is just flat out losing. It's really hard to find a defensive line here that works. Let's see, I just gave one example. f6 here, trying to block this diagonal in advance before I have a chance to pin the pawn. I can pin the f-pawn. I can take here with check now, and he can block with the bishop. And it seems like for a second maybe things will hold. You know, he can bring the rook over to help defend the f6 pawn if I double up on it. But in just a few simple moves here, rook to d1 hitting the queen, the exchange here, and then rook to d6, and things just fall apart. Don't forget about that advanced c-pawn, which suddenly has turned into a huge asset. So just in this position, there's different things that black could try, of course, but everything turns out to be a disaster. Bishop e6 maybe is a pretty natural move here too. And you just take the pawn, and you know, again the threats are rook to d1, queen to c3, and the pressure along this diagonal. If he ever plays f6 now, particularly if the rook comes over here to support that f6 push, then the bishop is left hanging. So things just fall apart for black in a big way here. There's just no way to defend. So kind of funny. So queen c1 is winning. I played bishop takes c4, you know, maybe winning, but basically it's just an advantage to white. I have to play well to win this game now. So let's see, he traded queens. Gets him out of a lot of trouble, gives him time to get his pieces out. Knight d4 hitting my pawn. I go bishop to d4 defending. Let's see, brings his knight over to f8. I play my rook to b1. One idea of this advanced c-pawn, by the way, is that it does keep a clamp on the b-pawn and allows white to build up some pressure against it. So that is another advantage of that advanced pawn. Let's see, he goes knight e6, though, going after my bishop here, taking away the bishop pair advantage. There's no great way to save the bishop, and I don't want to let it get kicked around, so I play a4 here. Let's see, what does the chess engine suggest? The chess engine says, actually, it's better to give up the light-squared bishop than the dark-squared one. This is not entirely clear, but what happens here is if he takes back with the bishop, which is kind of the more natural way, then that loses a pawn. That bishop is needed to defend the b-pawn. So he has to take with the rook, and so that's why. It's not about having opposite-colored bishops. It's more about the way that black's pieces are left a little bit tangled up. And so with some active play, even though this doesn't look like a great bishop here, the dark-squared bishop looks kind of sad. It looks like a big pawn there. But well, it's actually difficult for black to untangle in this position, and white has some edge here. That's the chess engine's recommended line. Still not clear if that's winning, but anyway, that's best play. Let's see, I go a4, and he takes the bishop off. I decide to take with the rook and keep this extra pawn here. If I took with the pawn, that pawn on d4 there might become a target, so taking with the rook seemed logical. He goes king to g7, unpinning the f-pawn. I go rook b d1, doubling on the d-file here. You know, I had kept his bishop tied down defending that pawn, but I couldn't figure out how to intensify the pressure on it anymore, so switched attention to the d-file. He went king f8. Go rook to d8, all the way to the back rank. And right here, he makes a mistake that gives me a winning advantage again. So he should probably trade. Rook takes, king up, and rook over here. I have some edge, you know. I've got pressure on these pawns. Maybe I can pressurize this pawn. But he can bring his bishop out to defend if I leave the back rank. So it looks like black is able to unwind. So with correct play, black should probably be able to hold that position. Instead, he played bishop e6. You know, it's kind of a clever idea, defending the rook with the rook, getting his bishop off the back rank, and hitting my loose bishop here. And but now a lot of material comes off, and actually it's a winning rook and pawn endgame. So I take here. This is correct. I take here. I messed up his pawns, and I bring the rook to d7. So all this I'd calculated, and in fact this is a winning rook and pawn endgame, but I mess up on the very next move. So after b5, I took with the c pawn, thinking that I didn't want to allow, if I took with the a pawn, he would have this these two pawns here, and I thought that might be too dangerous. But that's just not calculating correctly. Basically, I needed to look a little further ahead. So if I take this pawn, and he takes back, then I grab the h pawn. And the reason for this is not so much the pawn as it is to threaten rook here, picking up the rook. And now he has to do something about this threat. And the chess engine says his best move here is actually rook to d8, so that if I check, the king can come back and defend the rook. And then I can grab this pawn. And so no longer does he have a pair of passed pawns. He just has this isolated passed pawn. And I have two extra pawns over here on the king side. So this is actually winning. So that's the difference between winning and drawing. I played c takes b6. He takes back. And, I'm able to get rid of his connected pawns. He gets my pawn, but I get one of his by playing rook to b7. So I'm not in danger of losing, but I've also given up my chances of winning at the same time. Let's see, he tried to hold on to his pawn for a little bit. Let's see, I start bringing my king over. If he waits long enough, I can actually bring my king over to defend and then start scooping up these pawns or pushing my pawns over here. Notice that his king is trapped on the back rank, so that's a real asset here. So he played h5, I went king e2, he went to e5, I went king d3, he went c5, and I went king to c3. Of course, you have to watch out for cheap tricks. If the king goes to this square, he can take the pawn with check, which would be annoying. So at this point, he gives up and takes the a pawn. I take the b pawn. His king can come up. Oh, he played rook a2, attacking my pawns. Yeah, I thought his king would come up defending. And I took the g pawn. I could also have played rook to f6 with the check. But actually, it doesn't matter. All of these moves, the best I can hope for is a draw. I looked at it with the chess engine, and nothing works out in my favor in these particular cases. So this is not any worse than any other move. And let's see, king to c4, trying to stay active with my king. He finally brings his king forward, king f7. Let's see, rook to g5, and king to f6. Starts kicking my rook around, so I take this pawn. It's another trade of pawns. Rook takes g2, and then here. And I am, for the moment, a pawn up, but he's in position to stop it, so there's no way I can win this rook and pawn endgame. He plays rook e2. I can't get back and defend that pawn either. That's part of the problem. Let's see, I give a check. Went king f5. I played h4, just trying to get this pawn going. He takes here. I do have to be careful to get enough activity to make sure I at least draw. If I'm not careful, he could round up these pawns and try and win with his remaining pawn. Let's see, he went king to g5. Oops, sorry. He went king to g5, hitting my rook and the pawn. Simultaneously, I drop back, and now he goes after the pawn. I go after his pawn, and after these trades, I get all the way down to bare kings.
Insufficient material.
And yes, that's a draw. Okay, so that's how it ended, and that's it for this video. See you guys later. Bye.